Asia, thanks for taking the time to chat.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Before we get into the topics, do you want to give a quick introduction about yourself and your company to our audience?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Solnyshkina, and I'm a founder of a company that is called ProSense Digital. And this is a product company that builds custom software for uh, basically businesses. So what we're doing custom made and complicated software products like ERP systems, CRM systems, websites, and everything you can imagine. We're working with different companies all over the world right now. I have clients here in US, in Latin America, uh, even in Australia, which is kind of difficult because of the time zone issue, but we do operate worldwide right now. Uh, Basically, that's it.
Well, thank you for that. So I know I'm going to socialize the topics quickly. So are you essentially a managed services provider? You work with clients and help them build the software that they need to get done?
Yes, basically, yes.
Okay, perfect. We can talk a little bit about that as well because I just want to understand where the managed services market is heading, given all the changes we see in that space of AI and whatnot. But we'll get to that perhaps in the latter part of this conversation. So we have three topics here. Let's get started with, perhaps the third one here, which is building through uncertainty, growth, remote leadership, and reinventing a business model in real time. So can you share a little bit about your business and uncertainties that you've navigated?
Yeah, I'm navigating a lot of uncertainties in my life, actually, and with the business itself and everything. I'm from Russia, as you could understand from my name. I left Russia just when the war with Ukraine began. It was in March 2022. And this was really a time of complete uncertainty in every aspect of my life. So I left Russia with just my laptop and two kids. Uh, and basically with no plan of what I will be doing, how I will be managing my company. My company from the very beginning was a remote one. So probably this was not the issue, but I did understand that I had to rebuild everything from scratch in some other country. I At that point I didn't even know which country would it be. So uh, I did travel the world a lot. First I was living in Georgia, then I spent 3 years of my life in Mexico City. Brilliant, beautiful place. Right now I'm I'm trying to settle down here in US. So and by the way, moving the world, knowing different people, knowing different situations, and living through this really uncertain life, I'm trying to build a business, something valuable in this AI world, in this really rapidly changing world. And I do think that all those events in my life, they built some kind of resilience inside of me, and some kind, not just a resilience, but at the same time the agility. I do feel that right now I can adapt to the new world uh, a lot, because I've been traveling, I've been meeting different people, I've been working with different businesses, rebuilding the whole structure, the whole company, losing partners, and all of this. And I feel comfortable in this new AI era, which is really
Okay,
fast.
that's awesome. There's quite a bit to unpack there. Let's start with. So, did you have this business back in Russia, or did you incorporate this after you moved
No,
here?
yes, I did have a business, this business for uh, 8 years right now, I guess.
Okay, the reason I ask is, I would like to understand what some of the, culturally they're, worlds apart, right? Again, I come from the southern part of India. I've been lived here most of my life, but cultural differences they're plentiful. So I want to talk about the cultural differences between, say, Russia and the US from your standpoint as it relates to building software specifically, right? So it's not outside software. I mean, you're welcome to explore outside that as well. But more specifically, I want to understand what are, because I've worked with people in Eastern Europe, not a whole lot, but I've had the pleasure of working with folks in Prague, in Ukraine, and in Russia as well. And I know there are differences, and I would like to sort of hear it from the horse's mouth, if you will, as to what it means to build software in Russia and in the US, or maybe there aren't any differences because it's engineering, it's code, the machine's going to interpret that and execute it, and maybe the answer is no, there is no difference.
Yeah, there are plenty of differences between the countries, and I've been working in Latin America, in Russia, in Australia, here in US, and I do feel that there are a lot of differences because, for instance, when I was working in Russia, my clients came to me and they were looking for basically a good design. I was trying what I'm trying to sell to my clients. We're building systems. We're building something meaningful behind the good design. Yeah, design should be good, probably, but the main goal is to build something valuable for the customer. And the customer, yeah, they will, you know, uh, beautiful button will would not attract a customer. This is just a beautiful button. Yeah, this is pretty. This is nice. But what I felt about building business in Russia, it was all about let's do the pretty UI, and that's it. We're not thinking about the UX. Some clients in different countries are just the same, but I don't feel there are a lot of people who are so into details, so into design in other countries. Probably this is because I'm trying to educate my clients. Uh, he, I don't know. There are a lot of other differences as well. Um, for instance,
No, we could go.
hmm?
Sorry, go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
no, no. You ask.
No, I was going to say, you mentioned some there. You mentioned there was a lot of focus on, say, the user interfaces, for
Hmm?
instance. But even if you took user interfaces in general, right? Let's talk about UI. We're going to talk hopefully a fair bit about AI and what differences or what nuances that brings to the table. But before we get there, even as humans, when you're building user interfaces for clients in Russia versus building user interfaces for, say, your clients in Mexico versus the US, what are some differences that you see? Like, in other words, is it simply the choice of colors, layout, and components and those types of things, or are there some fundamental differences in how these things actually do end up looking?
Management strategies, because when I was working in Russia, I did feel lack of management in many companies. I don't know why, because probably this is a managing culture, or my country didn't have a lot of it. But this was the issue, and I had to invest a lot of my time just to educate my clients and to tell how good systems should be built. It's not about building the pretty interface, and basically this is the focus issue, what people are focusing on. And I really don't like when we're focusing just on pretty neat design, but on the meaning behind the system that we're building, the jobs that we're helping our customers to do, something we're helping to achieve our clients.
Okay, so that when humans are designing this, there are variations between how clients want it, even within a single geographic region, or when you go between countries, things are going to probably look fair a little bit different, I should say. But when you bring AI into the mix, a lot of this being done today, Asia, as you know, is, I am talking to a lot of founders where over 90% of the code that actually is created in their organization, these are smaller companies and sometimes even mid-sized companies, is actually being generated, right? So we've gone from humans writing 100% or maybe 90% of the code to humans beginning to only write like 10% of the code. So in other words, when you're building, say, if you take ceteris paribus conditions and you talk about a client maybe you worked with in the past and maybe you're working with them still today, how has that changed? Because now, a lot of this user interface, I'm presuming, is also being generated, right? Maybe you're vibe coding some of it, maybe you're not, but there's not a whole lot of discussion that's happening around how this should look. So how has that changed, and how are you doing things differently given the tools that are available today?
I'm doing things differently. Yes, I love AI, and I love everything that AI brings to our world right now, especially into design, because I don't believe that design should be done. Like a few years ago, I was doing design with the help of the team of designers who were doing their Figma prototypes first, like spent 2 3 weeks. They had some results. We brought it to the table, we discussed it, and then they went to another iteration and another iteration, and it could be month actually, before we get the proper design. And when we were spending those months on just trying to draw some prototype or some beautiful interface, the market situation could have changed, and this happened a lot. So right now my approach to designing systems and to building basically something is try to do it with AI first. So what are we doing if we're having, I don't know, the new website or the new system or the new automation tool for our client that we need to develop? First, that we're what we're doing, we're prototyping this on Lovable, and this is a great
Okay.
approach because I can do the the main essence of what we're doing is prompt engineering, like creating a good task for AI so it could understand the problem, what we're trying to solve, not drawing beautiful buttons, but solving the real business problem. And I do believe this approach is way better than creating design for months.
Okay, so let's talk about that, right? So, in the past, as a managed services firm, so, we are a product company, but we also do managed services occasionally just to keep the lights on. And I've done a lot of it in my past life, if you will. So I sort of understand consulting. And I think there's going to be a profound impact here, and here is why. And I want to get your thoughts on it. Now, let's say 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, maybe give or take, the client needed help building software because they needed developers to build software, right? That's the world a lot of us were
Hmm.
in. I mean, you could do a lot of things before you hired that developer or the consulting company or the managed services provider. But at some point, you knew you needed that help. I mean, I'm not saying you don't need that at all today, but that's changed seismically. You mentioned Lovable, right? A tool that a lot of people use to wipe code. And I talked to a lot of non engineers who are actually using that, whether they're building internal apps or external apps, and able to get a lot of it done using that. Now, I want to get into the pros and cons of these approaches, but before we go there, my first question to you, Asia, is when it's prompt engineering and when you're using a tool like Lovable, which is essentially mostly natural language processing, right? You're speaking to it or writing to it and it's generating, and then as it keeps building it, you iteratively make changes. Why should the client even come to a managed services provider to get this done? Because why can they not do this when they're just talking into this tool and writing into it to getting stuff done? What value is a managed services provider bringing to the table here?
That's an amazing question. Yes, I've been told for years in a row that software development will be dead like in a year, in a month, or sorry. Right now, what I'm experiencing with my exact business, it's actually not just thriving, but my client base grew. I don't know why, and I do feel this is because of AI. Probably this is the AI hype. Like everyone needs software right now because everyone are talking about software. But the second thing, yes, you can do everything with just speaking to a machine and trying to build something, but building code was never the essential part of building a good product. Knowing what questions to ask, I think this is the essential. Trying to understand the real business value, the real business problems that we're trying to solve. This is the value that we're bringing to the table. So probably it's not just about people writing code because we were never the company that just writes code. We're building systems that helps people achieve something. So probably this is the answer.
Okay, so let's say, you probably heard of the Jevons paradox, but if for folks who have not heard that, it's like an economic theory that basically says that when the cost of doing or creating something decreases, the demand actually does increase. For instance, Micron is a company, as a parallel example, where they create these memory, right? HBM and whatnot. And when the cost of memory, as it keeps going down, when they say when it actually did go down for a bit, the demand does increase, right? So yes, they might lose uh, by way of margin. Maybe there's some margin compression there, or maybe they're not selling as much as they're not making as much per sale as before, but they end up selling a lot more, so the volume increases. So from what you're telling me, it sounds like you said your client base increases, and even though it's much easier to build software, do you think it's because more people are actually trying to get this done because it's actually cheaper to get it done?
I don't know. I think that a lot of people just saw the ways how software can help them in their real operations. Because I do have a lot of people who are coming to me because they heard that AI can do this and that. They like businessmen. They know that their people are spending this much time for this exact operation. Why shouldn't it be automated? Why shouldn't we build the automation to, I don't know, to deliver quotes, to deliver presentations, to sell something? And this should be done. I don't know if it's the hype, or probably yes, it's cheaper, and right now the cost of mistake is lower. So probably yes, people are trying to understand this whole new world and what they can get with AI, and they do need help.
Okay, so what I'm still trying to understand, what is your moat for if somebody came and asked you, right? And I'm asking this not just of you, but of managed service providers in general, because there are a lot of consulting companies, really large ones, small ones, and mid-sized companies. And in the last every time Claude releases a model, right, a new model, a lot of these companies take a seismic hit. As you know, SaaS companies have been not doing that great. The software sector is taking a big hit because just because it's actually becoming a whole lot cheaper to build software. So if somebody came to you and you had to sell them the differences that you brought to the table as a managed services provider, like what is the moat that Asia and her team brings to the table, what would that be? I mean, I'm just playing the devil's advocate here because everybody can sign up to Lovable and use that tool to create software, right? It's super simple. You don't even have to be a developer. You don't have to ever written any code to use those platforms. So that does it add a sense of challenge? Because earlier, if you knew a certain language, a programming language, if you knew certain frameworks, certain libraries, certain architectures, that became your selling point because maybe your neighbor did not know those languages, or maybe they didn't know it just as well. Your competitors, by neighbors I mean your competitors. But now that it's the tool is actually doing it, and it's super simple to use these tools, how do you sell yourself as a business? Because you have to be able to explain to this non-technical client that, hey, you know what, I'm going to be using this tool, and but I'll be using it differently from somebody else who will be using that exact same tool.
I'm not using just the tool, because the tool is just the tool. I'm using my experience. I'm working 15 years in software development. I know probably a lot about how to to build a good software, and how to build a good system. So I'm not selling. I I never tried to build a company that is just selling hours. It's not like a body shop that is selling people who can write code or know some kind of frameworks. It's not the interesting business for me. What I'm trying to build is a products company, and I do feel that in this matter, AI is a real leverage for us, because we're not trying to sell just the lines of code. We're trying to sell the complete products that helps people with whatever they need. So right now I do feel that AI is a great leverage for ourselves, because with AI, what I do love doing myself, I do love to understand how people are behaving in this world, how people are interacting with software. And few years ago, making experiments was kind of a pricey thing for me. This was expensive, so I needed to invest, like, for instance, we're running some A/B tests or anything. I'm trying to understand what people really need from this exact product, how they will be using this. So if I'm running the A/B test, I'm investing this much money in A, this much money in B, and then I have to get rid of one of the options. Right now, this became just cheaper. So it gives me so many tools, not just to build software, to understand what people are really needing behind all this, because nobody needs the code itself.
Okay, so let's say you mentioned good design a few times. Let's get more specific with good and bad design. Can you explain to us what you mean by good design versus not so good design. I mean, maybe we can take an example of not necessarily something that your team built, but perhaps you could take one off the shelf that's out there in the world and sort of speak to what makes for something being good design and what makes for something not actually being of good design.
uh, I don't know. For me, I don't like to speak about like beautiful design or not beautiful design, because for me, beautiful is one thing. For you, it could be a completely different thing. But the good design is something that helps people achieve their goals, that helps businesses, and that meets these two goals, because customers.
No, but Asia, sorry to interrupt. I get that, but I'm trying to get a little bit more specific there,
Mhm.
right? So, what does good mean to a client? In other words, I have a problem, and that problem needs to be solved, correct? Using software. So, I mean, you could take whether it's Amazon.com, it could be anything. Could be, I don't know. You can pick any site that you actually think is good design, or perhaps pick one that's you think is not good design, so we can sort of understand where that separation is from your perspective.
Yeah. From my perspective, Amazon.com is a good design because it converts. And I don't know, some really beautiful agency designs, with the floating, parallax, everything is not such a good design. If Because I'm not thinking about how beautiful it is. I'm thinking about the goals. I'm thinking about what people are trying to achieve with that. And Amazon is definitely achieving their goals.
Okay, so I think we'll move on from there because we'll go to the next part of the topic then, right? So, how is AI changing software development very specifically, right? But before we go there, can you speak to, you mentioned Lovable because our audience is predominantly an engineering audience, so they're very curious to know very specifically about the tools and technologies that say our guest is particularly
Mhm.
using. So, what are some other tools? What are some languages that your team is working on currently? What are some frameworks that they're probably using, and what are some other technologies that they're using to get this good design done?
I'm sorry. The question again. You're talking about. I'm not using any languages at all. I'm not a coder myself. I'm a product manager.
Uh, no, your team. So do you want to speak? If you want to, we can talk about that. If not, we can move on. But I'm just talking about the languages that your team is actually using, your engineering team.
Vue.js, React.js, Python, PHP. Like, we're using a lot of them, and we can switch stacks. And this is kind of a part of a normal process for us. So it doesn't matter what exact language you're writing. This is what I'm talking about. Me myself right now, I use a lot of AI tools. I've been using Claude Design, for instance, this week, because it was out like a week ago or something. And this is fun.
Okay.
This is fun. And actually, it doesn't matter which exact tool you're using, which exact framework you're using.
Right. Okay. So let's go back to the reason I asked this is, you are a managed services provider, as you mentioned, right? You're a consulting company and you're trying to help people build
Mhm.
software. Now, as we speak through this, building software has become much easier and a lot cheaper, correct? So I'm still trying to understand the mode that you bring to the table, but we'll just move on from there. Uh, how do you compete with other providers, right? Because people anywhere in the world can do what managed services providers are generally doing, right? Whether you're in Southeast Asia, South Asia, you're in Europe, you're in Africa, you're in South America, all of these tools are available to just about everybody. And there are programmers everywhere, really good ones, and even folks who are not engineering or coders are able to use a lot of these tools and models today and actually generate code. So it's become commoditized, right? So in other words, I was reading an article the other day that said a year down the road, a lot of us may not even see the code that's being generated because it becomes such a commodity. So how in that world, do you still think there's room for managed services providers to survive, make a living, and actually be successful?
Mm, Probably managed service providers in common sense, no. But the companies that can build products and can achieve business goals, yes, absolutely. Because if you're given just a tool, it doesn't mean that you will be able to create a good, successful product, right away.
So why not? What are some things that could have them not be able to create those products?
In my company, we do have a lot of frameworks, how we're testing, how we're iterating with the design, with the code itself, or with the system that we're building, because we're building complex systems. That's not just a website or the landing page itself. This is a lot of integrations. We know ways of how doing these things or that things. So, uh, I don't know. Probably I'm wrong. And probably in a year or two, I will have to to go to some other business. But right now, I do feel like this. We're building products.
Okay, so it brings us, we have about, I'll give you an opportunity to ask me anything that you want to ask me. But the last thing we want to talk about here is what founders get wrong when scaling service businesses, right? So, what do you think founders get wrong?
A lot of things. I've been helping a lot of startup founders that were trying to build new products from scratch. And basically, I don't know, this is a really common mistake, but sometimes founders stick to their ideas, even though they, in the process of developing the product itself, they do understand that probably this idea is not right. But they're investing a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of everything into, I had this idea in my head and I have to stick to it and put it to the market. Uh, I don't believe in this approach because you're just putting all eggs in one basket. And I don't know, probably sometimes it's trying to convince yourself that you were right from the very beginning. But this is not how the market works. This is not how people are interacting with your exact product. Now, what I'm trying to do, and my approach is experimenting, playing with the market, trying to give people something and understand how they're interacting with this, how they're using your software, what exactly they need from your software, because this is not obvious. Absolutely.
Okay, so Asia, do you have anything to ask me?
Yes, I do want to discuss this topic because I did feel at some point that you probably didn't believe me or anything that minister.
Oh no no no! No, it's not that I didn't believe you. Of course, there's nothing not to believe, right? The thing is, our audience is very technical, correct, for the most part, at least. So I'm just trying to understand the specifics of these differences. I'll be honest with you, right? When you say good design and bad design, as an engineer, I want it to be more specific. I would like, I mean, that's the only way I would understand it. So, what constitutes a good design and what constitutes a bad design? Because those are English words and they're very subjective terms. But when you take that to engineering, we have to be more specific about what does it actually translate to. Let's say Asia is the client and she gives Krish a business problem and Krish is building software. I could have done it well with good design, or I could have done it poorly with bad design. But there has to be a very quantifiable difference between the two. Where I'm a little bit challenged in being able to understand what you said there was, what is the actual difference there?
The actual difference? Oh, I don't know how to answer this question.
Or I mean, or if you took an example of Amazon, let's say, as a good design, maybe you can think of one company or one product that's a bad design. So at least I know what that possibly could be, right? I'm trying to understand why Amazon is good design. Amazon is all right, but I don't know why specifically. Let me ask you a different question. Why do you think Amazon has a good design? Because I could argue otherwise.
Because of the conversion rate, I do feel I do love to look at the numbers.
But that doesn't, see, that's the outcome, right? That's the success of the business. That doesn't constitute a good or bad design. I mean, it could, you could argue that people who have a great design always find success, people who don't have a good design find failure, but that's not how life works, as we know. Sometimes you could have an incredible product, but there could be no product market fit, so that product goes nowhere. And there could be other products that have phenomenal designs, but they still don't succeed because maybe it was not even the right time. So I don't know if I agree that just because Amazon.com is a successful e-commerce site, that constitutes for good design.
This is a tough question, but you told that there can be a good product, but it doesn't find its product market fit. I don't believe this is a good product that doesn't find it. you know,
What do you mean? So you're saying every good product will find a good product market fit?
if the product does find product market fit, it is good. So it's vice versa in my head.
Yeah, okay, no, that I agree to the second part, right? If it does find product market fit, then it's a no-brainer, right? That's not even a point of contention. Surely they did find success, but that's easy, right? I mean, you don't need to go to college or school or have an experience to make that determination. But the difficult part is, why do some products not find the product market fit? Maybe that's a better question. Why do you think some products do not find product market fit?
I think first of all, it's a lack of research, and second, it's a lack of experiments. Because I really don't believe in the way when a product is built, solid once, and it finds the product market fit right away. It doesn't work this way. You need to experiment, you need to talk to your people, you need to talk to your guys, understand what's behind their what they're saying they need, because what people are saying they need is not what they really mean.
No, that's true. See, but the thing is, right? I don't know if you've heard this quote. I think it's a Henry Ford quote. At least it's attributed to Henry Ford. This was before they created the assembly line for cars. I think Ford said that if you were to have asked your customers what they wanted, they would have said that they wanted fast horses, not a car, right? So you cannot always build a product asking the customer, because I don't think Apple built the AirPods, not AirPods, sorry, what is it, the iPod, by asking a customer if they wanted an iPod, right? They created the product and they educated the customer as to what they wanted. So I don't know. I mean, is there, you cannot always hand out surveys and find answers before you build solutions.
Yeah, but I do remember I did have the first iPhone, and it wasn't good. Do you remember
But it was better than every other phone, though. It was undoubtedly better than every other phone that was out there. If not, going by your argument, because it's sold, it's got to be good, right? Isn't that what you said? If it's sold, it has to be good.
No, I did have this when I was a student when the first iPhone was out, and I spent like my monthly salary for this iPhone.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
I did understand it wasn't that good as an advertising or on the keynote.
See, because I'm asking you, there's a very genuine question, because as we create products in our company and as I work with other people who create products, sometimes you create the product that you think is good, it doesn't turn out to be good. That's understandable. But there are other occasions, Asia, where you're creating the right products, perhaps not at the right time, or maybe even it's at the right time, but you don't have enough money to advertise the product, market the product, to socialize the product, and to find your prospects. Maybe you have other constraints. So what I'm trying to find out is, in your experience, whether it's in Russia or here, have you seen scenarios where you thought, you know what, this company has actually got a good product, has a good team, but for some reason they did not succeed? I mean, can you think of any scenarios like that?
I came unprepared for this question. No, right now I cannot name any of the unsuccessful companies, because basically unsuccessful companies are out of of the picture all the time.
Okay, let's talk about successful companies with unsuccessful products, right? Not unsuccessful companies. So let's take Metaverse. That Meta spent about $85 billion at the minimum on Metaverse. They are a phenomenal company. They got fantastic engineers. They're probably the top 5 or 7 companies in the world. Why do you think they might have gotten? I'm just curious. I'm just taking an example of a company that is successful, but they created a product or a division that actually failed repeatedly before they pulled the plug on it. I'm just wondering, this is something important for people to learn, the audience who's watching and listening, because everyone tends to make a mistake. Sometimes, I mean, most times you don't know, otherwise you wouldn't be doing that in the first place. So what do you think companies should watch out for so they don't fall into these pitfalls?
I don't know about metaverse. I never was in the metaverse, and never actually tried to do anything there. I do remember a lot of products by Google. They have a whole summary of the products like Google
Google Glass is one of them,
Glass.
yeah.
Yes, I was in New York a few weeks ago, and I've tried this Meta Glass thing,
uh
and I don't know. Probably I have to use it for some time, but there at the store on I did feel I don't like it, you know. I don't know how to use it. I don't know how should I be watching with one eye on the street and the second eye on the Google Maps. How come? How am I using this? This is
Right.
not a product for me. I don't know who's using that. I do see some people in social networks who are hyping, you know, I'm having this meta glass, but
No, I agree. I'm not a fan of wearing anything. Even when Apple had the Vision Pro, it was like putting a brick on the head, and it is just almost impossible to use it. So those are good examples, right, Asia? So why do you think those companies, if you were to take a stab at why you think they're getting it wrong, possibly? I mean, the jury's out,
probably, yeah.
still not
I
out
don't know
on
the answer
Meta.
right now. Yes, probably I'm wrong, but what I'm assuming, people are sometimes building products not for other people, but for their own ego or their own goals or
I
something. Probably this is the issue. Um, we all know
mean, that's a fair
the people
thing.
behind all those brilliant maybe products, but that were never successful.
No, I mean that's an interesting way to look at it, right? So you're saying it's basically just to reword what you said there. Is it because the companies and the teams are married to their ideas and they think they're great ideas that they actually want to spend time and money building it, almost being oblivious to what the general audience out there might think? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm trying to say, sometimes people are building products not to be successful. Probably when we're having those examples like metaverse and the glass and everything. Uh, on one hand, this is the research and development process. This is some kind of R&D. If this will be the next big thing, we need to be the first, and we have enough money to build something and just try it out in the real world. And yeah, probably sometimes this is the ego thing, you know. On the other hand, I need to do this, I need to show this to my investors that I'm on the edge, I'm building something that will be the next big thing.
I want to also ask you about the impact of AI on general employment, right? You said you've lived in many countries, and you currently live in DC, but you've lived in many different places. As you see AI be able to do things much quicker, cheaper, faster, and whatnot, how do you think white collared employment is going to look like? I mean, if you were to be able to see the crystal ball, I mean, how are you planning like your career, for instance, going forward, saying, hey, you know what? There are a lot of uncertainties when we spoke of some of them as we started this conversation. What do you think the impact is going to be on white collared employment in general?
I don't know. Probably it will change all the markets drastically, because a lot of people who right now or a few years ago were employed, they will be unemployed because AI took their job. But I do feel that AI will create much more jobs for the people who can think, who can or mm, who has, I don't know, resilience, or who can understand how to interact in this whole new world. I do think that AI will create a bunch of new jobs and new talent and
Has it
challenges.
has it
Mhm.
has it created any new jobs that you're aware of in the last 6 months or so?
Vibe coders, yeah, sure.
Okay, so in other words, people who are not programmers, who are not computer engineers, for instance,
Yes.
have actually begun to be able to contribute. But that does that come at the cost of other programmers? Meaning the total net jobs is it's a zero sum game. Meaning 10 engineers or 10 developers lost their jobs, and 10 other non developers have become vibe coders. Or do you see developers transition to becoming vibe coders?
Smart developers will transition and will understand their place in this new world. Not so smart and who are not this deep in this profession and who are not willing to continue in this profession, yeah, they will go out of the market and do something else, probably.
And but what are some skills you think people should need? Because I've been building software for like say 25 years, for instance. Uh, you could take someone like me or somebody who's much younger, or perhaps someone a little bit older. What are some skills that engineer needs to have that they perhaps did not have in the past? something that's different from what they actually did in their previous life?
I think one of the most important things right now is curiosity, is trying to understand how to work in this whole new world. Because right now I'm hiring vibe coders in my company as well, because I do feel that my clients do need it, and I do have so many plans on vibe coding, and just essentially trying and experimenting with this new world. uh,
Well, you mentioned vibe coding a couple of times, but you probably are aware that Apple is cracking down on vibe coded apps on the App Store. They're actually rejecting apps that were vibe coded, right? So it's not, I don't know if it's a silver bullet necessarily, because you probably saw the articles where they're actually cracking down on vibe coded apps not being published to the App Store. So there, I mean, what do you have to say for something like that?
I'm not saying that vibe coders are doing production ready applications or websites. I'm saying that vibe coders
Oh,
can run beautiful experiments, and just understand, if I have some idea in my head that this should look like this, they can run this experiment. They can build few versions of the software and just try it out.
so, what skill, when you're hiring a vibe coder, they don't need to know coding or programming, right? So, who are you looking to hire? Like, what are some skills? Let's say if somebody's watching this podcast and they're just graduating from college, what do they need? What kind of skills do they need to have specifically, right? Not generically, but more specifically, so they could pass some of these vibe coding interviews.
I'm not having interviews in my company, actually. I don't believe in interviews and all.
So, how do you hire people then?
Mm, I do have this interesting practice in my company, but my managers have a task of keeping a bunch of small tasks that are not, essential, not this necessary. If the person will take this task and fail, and this will be okay. Everyone has this bunch of small tasks, and if I see on the CV and I see that the person is curious enough and smart enough, I'm just giving those small and really unimportant tasks to them. And
Okay, no, so you are interviewing them. It's just you have a different kind of interview, but it is an interview though.
that's a real.
That's not an interview, right? If you're not interviewing, then they're just walking in to get a job, right? What you're saying is your interview process entails that you give them tasks
Mhm.
and they have to get those tasks done, is how you're interviewing them.
Yes, I'm observing how they are interacting in the real world setting. Yes,
And do you look for a college degree or does it not matter?
does not matter. I have a lot of people who are brilliant but doesn't have a college degree.
Yeah, that's actually what I'm hearing from a lot of people. I mean, I'm hearing, I would say 50%. Half the time, people tell me that it's all right if there's no or diploma, but I have a equal number of people who actually still tell me that, hey, that actually answers a few questions for me, right? So I think this is good, right? I mean, uh, our experience in building software is different, right? Which is why, there are things that we probably have to agree and disagree as well. But I know, thanks for entertaining my questions. I threw a bunch of them at you. You're welcome to throw a few at me if you want to, and I can take a stab at answering
What
those.
do you think about the future of software development?
I'll answer generically and very specifically as well, right? I think the generic answer, Asia, is as somebody who's been building software for like over 2 decades, I don't think it was ever a static industry. I don't know about other fields. I've never done the same thing for years. I almost always have done something different every year. So a lot of us had to be in this changing world, right? So it was not static. But the pace of change, even though it was changing all the time, was never as drastic and rapid as it has been in the last 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or 24 months. So there is a difference there. So things were always changing, but they're changing a whole lot faster. And the other thing that's different is in the last 20 years of me building software, I've almost always needed a developer to help me build software, right? That's different now. That's a fundamental shift. When you go to hire people, like when we go to talk to people to bring on board, whether or not they need have a college degree, how you go about interviewing that person, how much engineering, software engineering do we think that they need to know, is something we're not exactly even sure, to be honest with you, because one part of me says I can hire anybody who can help using these tools and build generate code. How difficult can it be? But the other part of me says that if you don't understand the fundamental tenets of building software, like what persistence layers mean, what are the variety of persistence? I mean, why would you pick Postgres versus VV8, for instance, right? I want somebody to tell me. You can go to chat gpt all the time, or Claude, you can, to get these questions answered. If you always have to depend on these other tools and LLMs to get these questions answered, why am I hiring you in the first place? What value are you bringing to the table? So there is that I don't know, dichotomy, if that's the right word. Those are nuances that we're trying to figure out, right? Who should we be hiring into the team? The next part of it is the architecture of software systems is not going to look anything like it's looked in the last so many years. So I think even as engineers and architects who've built software for so many years, we have to forget our muscle memory and not build software the same way that we've done over the years. And I think that's easier said than done. A lot of times when I sit down to write code or build something, I sometimes, inadvertently end up doing it like I did 2 years ago. And I'm like, oh my God, Krish, don't do it that way, because that doesn't make sense anymore. You're going to have to do it differently. So if you've never done this before, you have an advantage because you will never do it the old fashioned way. But you also have never done it, so you don't have that experience, right? So the pros and cons, the double-edged sword. But you've done it for a long time. You've done many different things, but that sometimes can not be helpful because you're going to be biased in how you approach the solving of the future problems. So I think we are at a very interesting juncture, right? I mean, it's completely different. I mean, you're seeing Meta and layoffs all the time, right? I mean, I think Meta announced a layoff like 2 days ago, 8,000 people. AWS has been laying off people, but they had multiple outages like a month ago, and they attributed those outages to code being generated. So now they require, as I understand, that some senior architect has to approve the code that's being generated. So even these large companies, I don't know if they've gotten it exactly right. It's a moving platform. So the way I see software development change Asia is it's going to become very, very cheap. It's going to become commoditized. I don't know if you're going to be able to charge these top dollars to write code. I don't think so. You might be able to charge top dollars to build software with smaller teams, but you don't need a size of the team that you had before. Because I talked to one of the founders who told me they had he had 54 people in the team, and now he has like 8 people in the team. I mean, that's like what, 15% of the team. Now people tell me, Krish, I can have the same number of people and build 10 times more software. I'm like, yeah, that seems like a fair argument, but how does that explain every company laying off people? I mean, there's layoffs by the dozens, right? I know some large consulting companies in India had some layoffs, and a lot of the folks, like in India, from what I know, I've never worked in India, but they rely on consulting as a business to make money. Now, that's why I was asking about managed services, because a lot of the companies in India are managed services providers, right? Like Tata Consulting Services, Cognizant, Infosys. These are large IT consulting organizations which either have to retrain their existing employees so they do something very differently, or they're going to have to let go of a bunch of people. So I think it's an interesting point we are in, where everybody believes that they can build software, which they can to a large extent. But I don't know whether it's going to be production level software, or if you wipe code your way to production systems and you have a bug in production, does your team know enough to even fix those bugs? Or do they have to rely on another tool to actually help them detect those bugs, right? So I think, I don't know, that's my thought. So we have a fair mix of both. We do use a lot of tools, so we're not writing code that we don't have to write. At the same time, I don't think I'm comfortable pushing code to production that I've at least not seen one time. I cannot have a tool generate code and then push it to production. And last but not least, we are the type of company who would use a lot of these. We would use Claude, for instance, right? Or maybe we use Coder, a lot of these plugins and extensions to write code. But do I see myself using something like Lovable? Probably not, for many reasons. But that's something that, using a tool where I don't have enough control over each of the pieces of the puzzle is not something that might work for a company like us, but that's not to say that it doesn't work for other people, right? I know a lot of people on the podcast here who've never built software who've told me that they've actually used Lovable to do many different things. And maybe they give it to the development team after that, and maybe they have the dev team do something more, or maybe they push it all the way to production, right? So it could be one or the other. But that's where I'm at as somebody who's built software. So part of me is like, I want to hang on to my skills from the past, but there's another part of me that says, Krish, maybe those skills are not useful. Just let them go. Become a vibe coder or something. I know I said a bunch of different things, but those are my genuine answers to how we are approaching what we're doing at Snowpal, right? It's not imagination, but I'm telling you literally how we are doing it at work here.
Are you even afraid that AI will take your job, or?
I mean, I'm not afraid because I know it is going to. I have no doubts about that. I think the job that I have done all these years, Asia, like writing code, like every line of code, that job is gone. It's not coming
It is.
back. I talked to a,
It is.
sorry?
Yes.
I talk to a lot of developers who are still in denial, believe it or not, because people don't want to accept it. People don't want to accept it. At the same time, do I think that I can have a team full of non-developers and build software? I don't think so. I don't think so. Maybe it'll happen in future, but we're not there today, right? We're not there today because a lot of the decisions that I have to make today as an architect, I don't think I can rely on AI to tell me what to do. I can have AI do what I want for it to do, but I cannot have it tell me what to do because there's a slight difference between the two, right? So you want to use these tools to make yourself more productive, but I don't want to use those tools to lose my agency, right? I mean, we're all born with a certain intellect, good, bad, or ugly. If we don't end up using that, what is the point in living life? If I have to delegate everything to AI, you're bored. What else do I do? I mean, I don't have any other skills. I'm sure you have. I mean, I cannot play an instrument. I don't know how to dance. So I have only one singular skill, which is building software. So I have to figure out what I should do, what I should not do. And that's very difficult. I'll give you one more example, right? When I go to write code these days, you don't even want to write that line because you're lazy, because you're like, you know what, why should I write it? Because the tool should do it for me. And then you end up having the tool write the lines of code. And then Asia, what happens is it doesn't create it exactly the way you want it. So you start reviewing that code and rewriting it. And now you're wondering, why am I rewriting what the machine wrote? Should I have not written some of it and have the machine review that code for me? So the dilemma I have, I think a lot of us have, to be honest, is how much of the code should be generated, at which part of that code should be generated. What are some things that you might want to write? What are some things that you might want to delegate? And to make these decisions on all of these items, Asia, I think you need to have some engineering background. I'm not saying you need to be going to college and get a nice fancy diploma, but I still think you need to understand the basics. Maybe it's cultural. I mean, I don't use a calculator that much. Even if it's if it's a rough number, I do a mental math for the most part. I mean, I can rely on a calculator, but I was not raised my formative years back in India. You're asked to not use a calculator. So, you can live in a different country, but you're not going to change entirely. So I do appreciate some of those learnings. Similarly with software, I still think you need to understand the basic tenets of software engineering,
Yeah.
software development life cycles and how it's changing. Otherwise, you're going to have 1,000 apps in production in 6 months from now, and they're all going to be so buggy, and nobody's going to know how to fix those bugs, and they're going to wait for Claude to release more and more models and whatnot. I'm sure they do it, but that's at least that's what I see. But I think we are at an interesting point. If you have three other skills, it's a good time to explore some other skills. But if you're like me, who's got no other skills, then I have no other choice. This is the only option I have. I don't have the luxury of doing like 16 other things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. But the reason I asked you a bunch of things is just to get the perspective, because you have a lot of experience building software and like in different parts of the world, and that's very rich experience, right? And so you must have challenges around, oh, this is how they do it in Russia, this is how they do it in Mexico, this is how they do it in in some other part of the world, versus this is how they do it in Washington DC. And I'm sure if you go to like Seattle and California, because I do some projects with companies there, it's so different from how software is being written in Washington DC, where the two of us live, for instance, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, it was a long answer, but I just want to share everything that I could share with you there. Yeah,
No, that's a really interesting conversation because none of us really knows what's going to happen and how it will look like in a year or two. But I'm really not this. I'm way more positive about the changes that we're facing right now. And everyone are
absolutely.
saying that everyone will build their own software. How many people do you know who never built a line of code, never wrote a line of code, but at this point they made their own software? Do you know?
Yeah, no, totally. No, no, absolutely, right? Makes sense. So the last thing I want to ask you, and you can ask me anything else you want to ask me as well, is what is your favorite? Let's say you're going for dinner. You're going to, this is a question I ask of all my guests. What would be your order for an appetizer, entree, and dessert? It can be the same cuisine or different cuisines, but just one dish for an appetizer, one for an entree, and one for dessert.
I don't know. I'm not that into food, you know. A salad and steak and tiramisu for dessert. I don't know.
Okay. I mean, that's simple enough.
It is.
I
I love
understand the
simple food.
tiramisu.
I
Yeah,
love just just vegetables, just a piece of meat, and that's it. That's enough for me.
lovely. And given that you have culturally a rich cultural experience of having lived in these countries, maybe my last question to you might be: what are some things that you've learned from these different cultures that you are like, hey, this is a nice thing that's associated with this culture that you could share with our audience? You know, you've got experience of living in many different countries, so if you could pick and choose and tell us some niceties of what you've experienced and enjoyed by living in different parts of the world.
Even though all the people we might look not the same, we might behave not the same, but we're all of us are people. You know, I've seen people in Latin America, and I've been traveling the world a lot. I've been in China, in Singapore, everywhere, and everywhere people are just the same. That's interesting. Yes, we do. As
Actually,
a businesses, as I was talking about business structures, that people in Russia are focusing on good design, people here are focusing on something that I think is more meaningful. But uh, essentially, we all are people. We all are little children inside. We all have the same fears, the same, I don't know, joy, the same everything. So,
that's very beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, because a lot of times, people, you end up focusing on the differences, like what separates us. But that's so boring and unimportant. What you're saying is actually very nice. You said it very simply, but you're saying you've traveled, you've lived in so many places, and at the core of people, there's not that much difference that you noticed,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely,
People have similarities. Yeah,
absolutely.
amazing. My wife is from Malaysia,
Mhm.
so we have family in Singapore. So yeah, I do like that part of the world quite a bit. Actually,
No,
it's
Portugal,
beautiful
one of the best
landscapes.
places in the world. I love it so much.
And then which part of Russia are you from, Asia?
Moscow.
Oh, from Moscow. Okay. Yeah. There are parts of Russia. When I was a kid, one of the first books I had read, I forget that. I think it was called The Man from St. Petersburg. I've never been to Russia. Maybe hopefully I'll be able to see Russia one day. But one of the cities I wanted to go to is St. Petersburg, because I hear. Have you been to St. Petersburg?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, it's really close to Moscow.
Oh, is it like incredibly beautiful in terms of the architecture, like the buildings and everything in St. Petersburg?
Eh, I don't like St. Petersburg as much because it's so rainy and foggy always in St. Petersburg. And
Oh,
we're a person of a sunny weather, which is Moscow.
so, what would be, if you have to recommend the people go to one city in Russia that'll be somebody who enjoys architecture, traveling? What would that? I thought it was St. Petersburg, but you don't seem to agree, and obviously you know a lot more about Russia than I do. So, what would that city be?
For me, it's Moscow. Moscow is really beautiful, and it has a lot of really beautiful buildings and beautiful architecture, especially the center of Moscow. And it's insanely big. So you'll find
Uh,
big in
I,
Moscow, yes.
I mean, you're talking about a country that's got like 12 time zones, I think. So, we all get the size,
Probably,
right?
yeah.
I think it's like
I've been to Vladivostok. This is the another part of of the country, and it's no, it's 7 time zones away from Moscow.
7. Yeah, but I think the totality was some number like 11 or 12 is what I had read, that you have
No,
so many
it's not
different time
11. It's
zones.
like I don't remember how much. Not 11. Less.
Okay, cool. Anything else you want to ask me?
I think no. Just thank you for the good conversation.
No, thank you for taking the time, but I'm going to let you have the closing comment. And after you're done, Asia, just stay on the call for a minute or two, but take it away. Closing comment for our audience.
I don't know what to say. Um, Probably right now we all are building something new, some new world, and I do feel this is such an exciting process. So I know that a lot of people are afraid that we will lose jobs or AI will change something drastically, but I think we should just have fun of trying to do something new.
I think you said it better than I could have said it. So, folks, thanks to Asia Solnyshkina. Asia is a founder, CEO, and product strategist. We're going to include the link, drop the links to Asia's company, which is ProSense Digital, and the link to Asia's LinkedIn profile in the podcast. So, certainly do reach out when you have a need. With that said, thanks, folks. Until next time.